Most people hear that the writing sample is unscored, and they immediately translate that as thinking the writing sample is unimportant. But that's not how law schools think, and it's definitely not how admissions committees work behind the scenes. So today, I'm going to share exactly what happens when someone reads your application. First off, the writing sample is one of the very first things they see. When your file's opened, whether it's a top 14 law school or your local state school, your writing sample is right there, side by side with your personal statement, your resume, your LSAT score, and your transcripts. They're not waiting till the end to look at your writing sample. They're not saying, we'll read it later. It's there on the first screen. And it gets read, especially if the rest of your writing looks suspiciously perfect. Which leads me to the next point. The writing sample is how they figure out if you're the one who wrote your application essays. Admissions officers aren't stupid. They know that people help. They know that your friends could help edit your personal statement. They know that you could be running everything through Grammarly, or maybe you're using ChatGPT and asking it to make this sound better. They assume all of that. So they're looking for inconsistencies in your writing style. They're not reading it for your brilliance. They want to see, does it match the voice, the tone, and the fluency of your application essays? They want to see if it's the same person who wrote both, or does it look like a totally different person wrote it? Because if your personal statement is this smooth, flowing, beautifully crafted narrative, and your writing sample reads like a rushed email with half-formed sentences, that's going to be a major red flag. Of course, it doesn't mean they're going to throw out your entire file, but it will raise some questions. It will plant some seeds of doubt. And that seed of doubt could grow into real hesitation when they're deciding between you and someone else who sounds consistent across the board. Law schools also use your writing sample to evaluate your actual writing ability in the moment, because the writing sample is the only example that shows how you perform without help in real time under timed conditions. Because they know that the writing sample, nobody else is editing it. You don't get to revise it. You can't hit undo. It's just you and the keyboard in real time under timed conditions. And so when we work with students who are non-native English speakers, or even just people who haven't written an essay in years, the writing sample is the best place to look for quick improvement, because it's not about being fancy. It's just basic structure, clear sentences, logical thinking in the moment. And the writing sample is also becoming more important because LSAC is watching also. They're planning to score the writing sample sometime in the next couple of years. They're piloting rubrics and testing essay scoring systems. It's not scored yet, but LSAC is laying the groundwork to score it maybe next year or the following year. And it's not crazy to imagine that law schools want the writing sample to be scored as AI gets better at faking polished essays. And so if you're applying to law school in 2026, your response could become part of the data LSAC uses to build that future scoring system. Now, let's say you've got a 170 LSAT score and a 3.8 GPA. You're going to be competitive for scholarships for the vast majority of law schools. Maybe not the T14, but for most of the others. And there are going to be hundreds of other applicants, if not thousands, who have similar stats. So the question becomes, who's going to thrive in the classroom? Who will represent the school well? Who can write well under pressure? And if you're the one who has a clean, confident writing sample, that could tip the scale in your favor. And it doesn't even have to be amazing. It just has to show that you're sharp and you don't fold under pressure. Admissions officers won't say this flat out, but of course it happens all the time. Now, if you blow off the writing sample, if you skip it, if you treat it like a joke, LSAC will flag it, and law schools will see that also. They're not just going to say, oh, well, it's unscored, we don't care. They're going to ask, does this person take deadlines seriously? Did they even read the instructions? Can we trust them to show up and do the work in law school? And so if you're careless now, that becomes a question of professionalism, and that is not the way that you want to be remembered. And so the writing sample is not just a formality. It's a chance to show law schools who you are without filters. It does not have to be your best self, but it is going to be your real self. And if your real self is thoughtful, clear, and composed, even if not perfect, that is still incredibly powerful given that they know it's being written under pressure. And admissions is not only about your stats. Of course, LSAT and GPA are the biggest factors, but every single signal that you send plays a role. Now, the writing sample has changed in the past few years, and so you don't want to use outdated prep materials. Back in the day, the writing sample was a very simple basic prompt where you had to choose between two options. For example, should a company open its new store on Pine Street or on Oak Street? Or should the city invest in a sports arena or a public park? It was that kind of thing. No real research, no source material. It was just pick one of two arbitrary options, list a couple of reasons why you picked your choice, and you're done. It's it. And it felt kind of like a filler task. It was a formality. And it felt that way because it was. You didn't need a whole lot of strategy. But LSAC threw that out the window back in 2024. They launched the new argumentative writing sample. And this one's a bit harder. It's a bit smarter. Instead of picking between two fake options, you've now got to take a position on a real world issue. Something broad, something messy, something that people actually argue about, like, for example, what's the real purpose of college? Or should people prioritize personal freedom or public safety? You're not making up your own reasons anymore. Now you're given a couple of short source blurbs, each offering a different perspective on the issue, kind of like mini opinion pieces. Some are strong, some are weak, some are provocative. And your job is to pick a stance, use the sources to support it, acknowledge the other side, push back on it, and do it all in under 35 minutes with no outside help. And you've got to sound like a human being with a functioning brain under pressure. You've got 15 minutes to plan, then 35 minutes to write. This is more like a 1L law school final than a writing sample, and that is by design because law schools aren't just testing whether you can write, they're testing whether you can argue under time pressure, whether you can process multiple viewpoints, choose your ground, and defend it like a mature adult. And that is honestly the whole game in law school. It's not about being right because the choice that you pick doesn't really matter. It's about how well you argue for what you have chosen. And so when we work with students, we always remind them this is not a test of personal opinion. Nobody really cares what you believe or which choice you pick. They care whether you can stake out a position and build something logical out of the pieces you've been given. And this is where strategy matters. You are also expected to reference the source material explicitly. If you write your whole essay without mentioning at least two sources by name, you're going to be in trouble because it'll look like you ignored the instructions. Or even worse, it'll look like you didn't even understand the instructions. And that would be signaling that you're not really ready for law school. Law school is arguing from given source material, not free writing from your gut. And so to summarize the differences from the old writing sample versus the new, you are no longer choosing between two easy options. You've got to form an opinion on a real issue. You're given 3 to 4 short sources to read and reference. You've got to argue your position, support it, and address the other side. And you do all of this in one clean, structured, readable essay that you write in 35 minutes under pressure. And the good news is, once you know how this works and you build a repeatable strategy, you are way ahead of the vast majority of applicants. Now, the goal here again is not to be brilliant, just to be one of the few who actually gets how this section works now and executes under pressure. Now, remember, you're not being judged like it's a high school English essay. There's no admissions officer with a red pen circling grammar mistakes and deducting points for not having a 5-paragraph structure. That is not how this works. They are not expecting brilliant writing. They're not looking for the next great legal philosopher, and they're not hoping that you solve the prompt once and forever. They're looking for 3 specific things. That is it. And once you understand what those 3 things are, the entire task becomes easier and much more strategic. The first thing you got to be able to show them is, can you write a clear, logical argument? That is the number 1 priority. They want to see that you can take a position and support it in a logical way. Not trying to cover every possible nuance, just make a point, choose a side, and stick with it. And so when you choose a side, you're not giving a 360-degree analysis of the entire issue. You've just got to say, here's my stance, here's why, and here's how I respond to the other side. You also want to keep the argument tight. You're not going to meander. You're not going to try to sound smart. You just want to be clear. I mean, you could have the most brilliant insight in the world, but if it's buried in 5 paragraphs of fluff or vague language, no one's going to find it. And if your essay feels scattered, like you're arguing 5 different things at once with no structure, they'll assume that's how you think under pressure, which is not great news for a law school applicant. The second thing you want to show is, can you write in fluent, readable English? This is not about being fancy. It's not about big words or long sentences. It's about showing that you can write in a way that is smooth, structured, and easy to follow, because law school is writing and legal work is also writing. So the writing sample becomes a kind of litmus test for whether you can produce clear, competent writing without anybody helping you, without AI. They want to see proper grammar and punctuation, clear transitions between ideas, sentences that don't run on forever, paragraphs that stick to one point at a time, and an overall flow that sounds like an actual human wrote it. And so when we work with students who feel rusty with their writing or they're not native English speakers, we don't try to make their writing fancy. We focus on making it clean, simple, and clear. You also want to show, and this is the third point, can you respond to the other side without losing control of your argument? This is the difference between someone who can think critically and someone who just states an opinion. Law schools want to see that you can acknowledge a competing view and still defend your position with composure. That is how legal arguments work in real life. Because when you're a lawyer, you're going to be up against opposing counsel. You'll get grilled in class when you're in law school. You will write memos where the other side actually has a point, and you'll need to push back without a meltdown. And so the writing sample, if you act like your side is the only valid viewpoint and you ignore the other side completely, that makes your argument feel one-dimensional and like you're lacking nuance. But if you can show that you understand the strongest argument against your position, and then you can explain why your stance still makes more sense, now you're showing your ability to reason under pressure. Now, here's what law schools are not looking for. They are not looking for the right answer to the prompt because there isn't one. They're not looking for perfect grammar because mistakes are fine. It's a first draft, but the writing just has to be readable. They're also not looking for genius level insight because no one's going to solve AI regulation in 35 minutes. And the essay does not need to be polished like it was written by your English professor. They just want to know, can you think clearly and express yourself under time pressure? If the answer is yes, even with basic, simple language, congrats, you've passed the test. Now, here's where this gets real. If your personal statement is beautifully written, but your writing sample looks like it was slapped together in 5 minutes with half sentences and no structure, it doesn't just look inconsistent, it raises the question, did you even write your personal statement yourself? And that would be the worst case scenario. Not because your essay was bad, but because it creates doubt. However, if your writing sample is clear, if it's structured, if it's thoughtful, even if it's simple, then everything feels aligned and you come across like somebody who's ready for law school. And maybe you're right on the edge. Maybe your LSAT score is solid but not spectacular. Or maybe your GPA isn't perfect. A little boost in trust from your writing sample, it could be the thing that gets you in the door. Because the writing sample is really a credibility check. It's your chance to show that you've got the mindset, the discipline, and the control to succeed in law school when nobody is editing your work for you. You know the writing sample matters, you know how it's changed, you know what they're looking for, but let's talk about how to actually do the writing sample because this is where most students panic. They open up the prompt, they see a broad question like, what's the purpose of college, or should AI be regulated, and they freeze. They try to come up with some brilliant take, they second guess their argument, they start writing, they delete everything, and then they run out of time. And that is the worst case scenario. But the good news is, it is completely avoidable if you have a plan. And so I'm going to walk you through the exact 5-step process we use with our students at LSAT Unplugged. This is a blueprint that you can use for any LSAT writing prompt, no matter what the topic is. Here are the 5 steps. First, you choose your side quickly. Second, you outline before you write. Third, you follow a simple structure. Fourth, you use the source material effectively. And 5, you keep it clean, concise, and readable. Each one of those steps solves a specific problem that causes students to write poorly under pressure. So let's break it down step by step. First, you want to choose your side quickly. You've got 35 minutes to write, and you can't spend 5 of those staring at the screen trying to pick a side. You've got 15 minutes to plan. Use those 15 minutes wisely. The mindset is you are not being graded on what you believe, you're being evaluated based on how well you can argue. And so you want to pick the side that has the most obvious support, the one that you can write about fast. It doesn't matter what you personally agree with, it's just a logic test. Then, second step, you outline before you write using your 15 minutes of planning. This solves the problem of having no structure. You just got to have a 5-bullet skeleton. Your thesis, 2 strong arguments in your favor, 1 counter argument, and 1 rebuttal. This skeleton holds everything up. If you don't have a skeleton, you're building it out paragraph by paragraph with no plan, and that's how you end up rambling, repeating yourself, or contradicting yourself halfway through. So take your full 15 minutes to outline. It'll save you a lot of time later when you're actually writing. Third step, you follow a simple structure. Paragraph 1 is your introduction and your thesis. Paragraph 2 is your single strongest argument. Paragraph 3, you share your second argument. Paragraph 4, you have counter arguments and rebuttals. And paragraph 5, you have a 1-sentence conclusion. That is it. You don't need a clever transition or a 5-paragraph literary masterpiece. You just need structure and logic. And this framework gives you all of that, so you never get stuck thinking, what's next? Then step 4, you use the source material effectively. This solves the problem of forgetting to reference the sources and now just freestyling. You refer to at least 2 of the provided perspectives, the source material. You name them, you quote them, you paraphrase them, then you explain how they support or oppose your argument. I'll break this down naturally in a bit, but for now, I'll just say, if you don't use the source material, you are not actually answering the question LSAC asked. And if you follow this approach, you show you can engage with the evidence, which is a core skill in law school. Then step 5, you keep it clean and concise, because you are not trying to impress them, you're trying to be understood and be clear with short sentences, clear arguments, and simple words. You want to use transition phrases like, for example, on the other hand, as source B points out, or this shows that. And you always want to save at least a few minutes at the end to reread what you wrote and fix anything confusing, because even one typo or messy sentence that could be avoided, you want to avoid it. So if you can quickly clean up at the end, that shows that you care and that you have the ability to proof what you read and what you write. And the reason this works is because most people don't prepare for the writing sample at all. So if you have any structure at all, it's going to stand out because it's going to show by comparison that your writing is clear, it's organized, and it is consistent with the rest of your application. And that's what law schools actually care about. So just follow the blueprint, and that way you won't send the red flags when everybody else does. Starting with step 1, you want to choose your side quickly, and you never want to look back because you've got limited time, right? And so the first 15 minutes are your planning period. You don't want to overthink. You don't want to second guess. You don't want to read the sources over 3 times. You just want to pick one side arbitrarily even. There is no best side to pick with the writing sample. It's not a moral debate. You are being evaluated here on your ability to take a position and defend it logically. That is it. And so your first job is to pick a side that you can argue quickly, clearly, and with as little resistance as possible. So first, you pick the side ideally with the most ammo, not the one you agree with. You don't have to pick the side you believe in, even if you can't support it really well. Belief is irrelevant here. It is all about the strategy. So you look at the source blurbs and you ask yourself, which side has more concrete arguments? Which side has at least 2 usable perspectives? Which one could I explain in 1 sentence to a friend? That is the side you take. Think about it like you are a trial lawyer. You are not here to express your truth. You are here to win the argument with the clearest case. And you don't want to try to be original. You want to try to be clear. No one is expecting you to come up with a brand new take on the topic. Your goal is not to be profound. If the prompt's about whether college should focus on liberal arts or career prep, and the sources appear to be stacked with reasons supporting career prep, you pick that, even if it feels boring, or even if you personally love philosophy classes. You are not being rewarded for creativity. You are being rewarded for structure and logic. So don't make it harder than it needs to be. Go where the evidence points. Then you scan the sources once and you make your decision fast. You should spend no more than a minute choosing your position. You are not trying to fully understand every nuance in the source material yet. You've just got to have a quick mental tally. For example, can I think of 2 arguments in support? Can I respond to the other side in 1 paragraph? And are there at least 2 perspectives I can reference? If the answer to those questions is yes, you lock in that side. You write your thesis at the top of your scratch paper, you underline it, you circle it, and you commit. Because once you've made that call, you are done thinking about it. And you are not allowed to flip sides halfway through the essay. It would make you look indecisive and lead to a jumbled, contradictory mess. You also want to choose the side that lets you move the fastest, because the best argument is the one you can write fast given limited time. Even if the other side seems more sophisticated, if it would take you too long to set up, you want to skip it. Your goal is to deliver a structured, supported argument under pressure. And if both sides seem equal, you pick the one with the stronger counter-argument because that gives you more to work with later in the essay. Law schools want to see that you can acknowledge the other side and respond like a mature adult. So if one side makes it easier to do that, you take that opportunity. And then you commit. Your mindset should be, this is my case, and I'm going to win it. You're not leaving the door open for second guessing. You don't want to squeeze in points from the other side to sound balanced, because that's only going to water down your argument. Instead, you make your case clearly, you own your position, and you back it up with sources because you have limited time. And once you master this idea, the rest of the essay gets that much easier because you're not stuck in your own head. You are only building forward. Then the second step is you outline before you write. And that outline only takes you 2 to 3 minutes, but it sets you apart because nobody else does it. A few minutes up front will keep your essay from falling apart later. Your outline should include your thesis statement, your first supporting point, which is the strongest argument, the second supporting point with a different angle, the counter argument, and the rebuttal, which is where you're showing why your position still holds up even if the counter argument is a valid point. And then finally, you close off with a conclusion idea if you think you'll have the time. And your outline could be bullet points, shorthand, or notes. What matters is that the outline gives you structure so that when you start writing the actual essay, you're not improvising, you're just filling in the blanks. Then you use the sources when you're writing the actual essay. So you want to map each source to a particular point. So for example, your first point, your strongest argument, maps to source A. Your second point maps to source B. Then the counter argument maps to source C. If you outline this up front, it's a huge time saver when you're writing the full essay because you've already mapped out where the quotes go and where the paraphrases go. And this saves you from the biggest mistake on writing sample, which is that you run out of time halfway through paragraph 3. If you outline, it forces you to think about your pacing up front because you see if your argument's getting too long or too scattered, you can adjust it and speed up to later sections of the essay before you actually start writing. And remember, it's not about perfection. You're not building a detailed blueprint. You're writing 5 or 6 bullet points, maybe 7, just to let you know what each paragraph going forward is going to be about. And this helps you stay structured under pressure because you are including every single point. Intro, first point, second point, counter, rebuttal, conclusion. That's it. And if the prompt feels overwhelming, you write your thesis statement first to give you a clear sense of where you're going to take it, and you have your outline mapped out for what you're going to do, where you're going to take the essay. And you could write just one sentence for each paragraph and expand each one little by little to keep you moving forward, make sure that you don't miss anything. Now, when it comes to structure, what you want to do is keep a 4 or 5 paragraph structure. Again, paragraph 1 is the introduction. You restate the issue in your own words. You clearly declare your thesis. That is it. You are not yet explaining anything. You're not even diving into the sources. You are just setting the stage. Then paragraph 2, again, is your strongest argument. That is your anchor. You lead with the most persuasive, evidence-backed point supporting your position. That paragraph should have a topic sentence that previews your point, one or two sentences explaining why that point matters, a quote or a paraphrase from one of the sources, and a line or two explaining how that source supports your position. That's it, just 5 sentences max. Then paragraph 3 is your second supporting argument, same level of quality, but from a different angle. Same structure though, topic sentence, explanation, source reference, and you link it back to your thesis. Then in paragraph 4, you address the other side and you rebut it. This is your counter argument paragraph. And law schools love to see this because it shows that you can think critically and handle disagreement with maturity. And so for paragraph 4, you state the opposing view as fairly and as clearly as you can. Then you quote or paraphrase the source that supports it. You acknowledge why someone might believe that, and then you calmly explain why your position still holds up. Remember that you are not trying to destroy the other side. You're showing that you considered it, but you still chose yours for a good reason. And then finally, you have the conclusion. And the conclusion is optional, by the way, not absolutely necessary. But if you have time, you could write a quick final paragraph to wrap things up, just 1 or 2 sentences that reaffirm your thesis and they tie the whole thing together. But do not start writing this if you are pressed for time. It would be better to polish the rest of the essay than to rush through a conclusion that you don't really need. Now, the reason this sort of structure works for writing samples is because you are writing under pressure. So this is not the time to get creative. You don't have time to reinvent the wheel. But when you have a consistent structure, you give the reader what they want in the order they expected. And when your essay is organized like this, it feels more professional, even if your writing is not perfect. No one is grading you on flair or creativity. They are evaluating how well you can think, organize, and communicate under time limits. And if you want help staying on track while you write, here's some tips. First, you glance back at your outline between paragraphs, because that keeps you focused. And if you find that a paragraph is starting to sprawl, you go back to your point, or you move on to the next section. And think through it 1 paragraph at a time. And once you master this structure, writing becomes a simple, straightforward checklist